All right, everybody. Hello, welcome, good morning. Welcome to the board budget workshop this morning on Monday, June 9th, 2025. We will call the meeting to order and I will establish quorum. We have Carlin Fryer, Sarah Falkenberry, Dallas Pipes, Dr. Kraft, myself, Christy Schmidt, Courtney Daughter Bruce, Rich Senna, and Garrett Wilson. In closed session, we will be discussing A, pursuant to Texas Code 551.074, deliberating regarding matters related to employment, appointments, resignations, terminations, retirements, and reassignments. And B, pursuant to Texas Code 551.071 and 551.129, consultation with legal counsel regarding legal issues concerning the status of and contract of for the Aquatics Learning Center project. So we will head to closed session at 8:30. All right, welcome back, everyone. We are reconvening to open session. We will reestablish quorum. We have Carlin Fryer, Sarah Falkenberry, Dallas Pipes, Kristen Kraft, myself, Christy Schmidt, Courtney Daughter Bruce, Rich Senna, and Garrett Wilson. We are back to open session at 9:21. First, we have visitor comments and testimonials, which we have nobody signed up today. And next, we have consider action, if any, regarding items discussed in closed session. First, we have consider and take possible action regarding the status of and contract for the Aquatics Learning Center project, including possible delegation of authority to the superintendent.
I move to proceed as discussed in closed session.
All right, we have a motion.
Second.
Second, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, same side. Okay, motion carries. And next, we have requests for approval of routine personnel items.
I move we approve the personnel report as presented.
Second.
Okay, I have a motion and a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, same side. Okay, motion carries. Dr. Kraft?
All right, thank you, President Schmidt. We are very excited for 2 introductions this morning. Any opportunity that we have to promote from within is always a great day in Boerne ISD. And the board just approved Jessica Schultz to be principal at Voss Middle School. So excited for Jessica. And also our new principal for Viola Wilson Elementary is Lauren Sanders. Jessica and Lauren, if you could both step up to the microphone. We are so excited for this next step in your leadership journey. And you've done phenomenal work. I've been very impressed with both of you from the very beginning of my time here in Boerne ISD. And I just want to say thank you for serving our families and our staff so well. And we're excited for what's ahead at both of these schools. Jessica, how about you start and just say a few words if you'd like, and then also introduce any guests you have today.
Thank you for this opportunity, first of all. I'm very much looking forward to a growth opportunity for myself. I'm also excited that I'm going to continue with most of the families that I've had the opportunity to watch over the last 9 years or so. It's a great place to be, I've heard, and so I can't wait to continue that on. I brought with me my husband, Michael, and my daughter, Kara. Kara will be an 8th grader there at Voss this year, as most of you know. That's my group with me.
All right, congratulations. Ms. Sanders?
Good morning. I just want to thank you all for this opportunity to serve at Wilson Elementary. I'm excited about transitioning from the high school to the elementary. Being at the high school for so long at Boerne High, I get to see them when they walk across the stage and conquer all of the things that started at the elementary. I understand the importance of what happens at the elementary and the foundation that requires to build a strong future of success. And so I'm excited to bring my experience of the high school down to the elementary and kind of inspire a new generation of leaders. Today I brought with me my husband, Jason, who is a teacher and a coach at Champion High School, and then my 2 boys, Callan, who will be a 6th grader, and Parker, who will be a 4th grader. We are deeply rooted in this community, and we are excited to serve and continue to serve. I'm excited to serve with my new team at Wilson Elementary. Thank you guys so much for the opportunity.
Thank you. Want to go down with the picture?
Yes, please.
Okay.
We'll do a picture, please.
I know.
All right, congratulations again. And next we will have discussion of social media addiction litigation, relevance for school districts by Krista Pomeroy.
All right, good morning. For Dr. Kraft, this morning I want to talk about pending litigation related to social media and the implications on youth mental health. Note this discussion is not about eliminating social media, rather it's about addressing the addictive nature of the algorithms behind the social media. We know that teens who are on social media more than 3 hours a day, there are implications on their mental health. We know that 40% of teens who are on social media report having experienced loneliness and depression due to comparing themselves on social media. And we also know that the use of social media disrupts sleep and brain development, therefore leading to suicidal ideation and other mental health concerns. So there is pending litigation that Bernie ISD has the opportunity to join. And today I'm going to talk to you a little bit about that litigation. The executive summary is listed here, but basically what is coming to be is there's a multi-district litigation that is not involving just Texas, but you'll see nationwide that this litigation is pending in order to go after the big five. The big five social media companies are Facebook, YouTube, Instagram, TikTok, and Snap. Basically what they're attributing the litigation to is, again, the addictive nature of the algorithms that are used within these big five social media platforms. The multi-district litigation, there are 3 different parties: the personal injury plaintiffs, the school districts and local governments, and the state's attorney general. Multi-district litigation basically stands for the consolidation of multiple parties to come together to proceed with the litigation. The multi-district litigation for the state of Texas, these are currently the school districts who have joined the litigation. You can see them listed there. This was as of May 1st. The original deadline to join the litigation was the end of May. However, they have extended the opportunity to join the litigation. Just these school districts here impact 2.2 million students. Across the nation, there are over 500 school districts who have joined the litigation. 500 nationwide. And that was as of May 1st. The school districts are seeking basically compensation from the big five social media platforms, basically having a complaint that it's a public nuisance, interfering with community health and safety, and then negligence. Operating platforms that lead to compulsive use, addiction, harming students' mental health, and impacting the school's educational opportunities and efforts. When we look at the potential damages that we are seeking compensation for, some of them are listed here. We can see that we are having to potentially have to hire additional staff, the time that we're expending to confiscate cell phones, to address the mental health care, the counseling needs, responding to threats made against schools, adding information technology resources to monitor, to scan, to view, developing new and revised teaching plans to address the addictive nature of social media, and providing additional learning supports to address students' their declining academic achievement. We've seen most of these things within Bernie ISD. We've definitely seen a decline in students' mental health, sometimes attributed to social media. We do have our social media platforms that we monitor through Lightspeed, through P3, but we are definitely seeing the impact on our students here in Bernie ISD. There is pending a pending bill, a bipartisan bill within the U.S. Senate called Kids Off Social Media. This bill is aimed at creating a minimum age for social media usage of 13, putting parental controls in place. But where this really impacts us is that there will be school requirements for monitoring and filtering social media usage within the school setting, as well as having to provide mental health care for students. So these are all things that we know potentially will come about from this bill, and we want compensation from the big five to help us offset the costs for this. To join the litigation, there are no upfront costs or out-of-pocket expenses for the district. The attorney fees are contingent upon the recovery calculated as the lesser a percentage of the total recovery of 4 times the attorney's hourly rate. There is anticipated very little time that the district would have to expend in gathering data and providing information, because Moat Casey has partnered with the law firms in order to gather some of this data from PEEMS. They anticipate the district having to spend approximately 30 to 50 hours, but when we spoke to the attorneys and they did their presentation, they really feel like it would be a lot less time because of the partnership with Mo Casey and the reporting sources that we would have in order to provide that information. And then consulting experts would be available to us if we were needing to provide any additional information. In the event there's no recovery, there are no costs to the district. They did state, the attorney stated that the goal is to get compensation to reimburse the school districts for the anticipated expenditures that we would have to put out for any unfunded mandates. One of the examples they gave is if, we're wanting to lock up cell phones or restrict access to cell phones, the things like the pouches that you've heard about, the magnetic pouches, those would be unfunded if they mandated that we needed to put something like that in place. However, this litigation is seeking compensation from the Big Five. The risks associated with this are no settlement or award, of course, us taking too long to join the lawsuit or to approve our participation. If we don't meet the deadline to join the lawsuit, we would not be able to have the compensation benefits if the litigation was won. Getting an award or settlement less than a comparable school district, or if a settlement is not offered and accepted by the parties, each individual case may be sent back to the local jurisdictions. In Boerne ISD, we know that this is a reality, so whether we go after the Big Five with this litigation or not, we are committed to addressing student mental health associated with social media. We see it every day. So these are some of the things that we've already done and put in place. We've trained staff on social media safety and the signs of cyberbullying. We've developed parental guidance for safe internet and social media usage. We've hosted book studies specifically on the anxious generation. Counselors, nurses, and parents have participated in that. We've facilitated morning meetings and advisory lessons regarding social media safety, held middle school assemblies focused on social media, digital citizenship, and cyberbullying. We've presented student and family engagement events on the dangers of social media, continued internet and social media oversight using digital monitoring tools. Our PACT members, which is our Police and Community Together members, we've been committed to supporting individual students and family members through their mental health challenges, but also the detrimental effects of social media. And we've provided individual and group counseling sessions to support students and their mental health. So regardless of the litigation, Boerne ISD is again committed to making sure our kids are well. But when we get those unfunded mandates, it would make it a lot easier if we were able to respond and had the extra support from a financial standpoint. At this time, I'll open it up to discussion or any questions you have.
One, I really appreciate all your effort and work in this. It goes well beyond any paycheck, and I really appreciate that. And I've had a lot of parents and people in our community say that, we're doing really well and love what you're doing, and Mr. Goodrich on that side. And I want to, hopefully, we want to continue that. We want to continue the outreach, and hopefully we get more support and more community involvement, because it's not what I know, it's what we know. So sharing that information that y'all have gathered and the pursuits that y'all are going after, I think is noble, and I hope that we continue that. Thank you.
I echo that sentiment as well. Would you mind explaining the collaboration with the PAC members on the support they're offering students and families, please?
So we have been very committed. When I say we, the district, but also Rick Goodrich and I have been very committed in building our community supports and that network. So we meet monthly to address concerns related to students or families with the intention of building those supports. We've seen a lot related to social media because it spreads like wildfire, right? And our keyboard warriors have the potential to do a lot of damage. But aside from that, our kids are constantly on social media, and it's really impacting their mental health in the sense that they are comparing themselves to one another. They are judging them, their peers, but themselves most intentionally or intensely. So the PAC group comes together to talk about some of those things, but more importantly, to determine what can we do? Who can we reach out to? Who has the resources? Who can we connect them with? Because our goal is 24 hours, 24/7. We're wraparound services, and we know that our kids the challenges they face, our families face, it doesn't end at the end of the school day. So that's been a real focus. But monthly we meet to talk and see who needs support, how can we support them, and what can we do to help.
Thank you so much.
Sure.
Would you also explain real quick who the PAC members are, if just to clarify?
So the PAC members are Bernie PD, Kendall County Sheriff's Office. There's several local nonprofits in that group, juvenile probation. We have some social workers from MHDD, our local mental health provider. It's really, those are the continuous care, but we will bring in other resources to join that as necessary.
I'm so thankful for our community that truly supports Bernie ISD and the partnerships. And thank you for that. I mean, I think that goes back to just getting these supports together. So collaboration is always best, and I love community.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Welcome.
This is great. Sorry, Rich. This is great. I can't wait to talk about the legislative outcomes concerning cell phones. So this is proactive. Do you have any idea of knowing like the timeline of the litigation?
So they anticipate it starting in October. They've already done the first round to see if what they didn't want to do is take it to court and then have it thrown out. So they've already done the preliminary case and saw that the judge was going to accept and follow through with the proceedings. So they're anticipating October is when we would start to go to trial, or to hear it in court. Sorry, not to trial, but.
Thank you, Krista, for this information. I assume you and Dr. Kraft want to gauge our thoughts on whether to join the litigation.
Correct.
Okay. A few thoughts on that. Last summer, we read as a board the book, The Anxious Generation. And it was it was data-driven. There was a lot of thoughts on the addictive nature of cell phones, social media, and very, very disturbing. It was nice that I had a family dinner last night and all the phones were down. No phones. We could actually talk and converse. Definitely there's concerns about the big five. I mean, TikTok, we've all read about their affiliation with the Chinese government, new ownership allegedly. But there's no doubt the addictive nature of social media and phones is detrimental to our youth. And actually, I think it's the antithesis of developing critical thinking, which is what we want our students to have. We don't want them to have a herd mentality. We want them to be critical thinkers. And I don't see how social media helps in that, to tell you the truth. So I wonder whether the real goal of litigation, yes, some of it may be monetary to recoup costs that we would incur, but it's also to change the behavior of the big five. Which would be a good thing. Christy, you mentioned before the legislation, House Bill 1481, was passed by both the House and the Senate in Texas to ban cell phones during the use of the day. It's still allowed in the event of an emergency, I believe, but I'm sure the governor will sign it. So that's, and the legislative author of that, by the way, is a 25 or 26-year-old. She's the youngest member of the legislature, and she sees the impact it's had on her generation. And her comment upon introducing the bill was, rather than putting the district school boards in the position of being the bad guys of taking away phones, we'll just do it legislatively at a state level. And that's exactly what they've done. So normally I'm not a fan of litigation, but since our risk is almost nil, I'd be okay if we join this, because I think we need to send a message out that children need to be learning, and this is a tool, but this is not your life. That's what I think.
Krista, I would echo pretty much everyone's comments. Did have just a couple of questions. So our legal counsel's reviewed this. Anything that there's concerns with in adjoining the?
So we haven't shared with them yet. We were wanting just to have the discussion opportunity here. We have next steps, which is to consult with our legal team. But yes, we do have the next steps that are outlined
No exposure of any kind.
Yes.
I think any opportunity to get some funding to offset costs that we know we're incurring are great. And Dr. Kraft, I didn't get to ask you this ahead of time, but Spring Branch is on the list. I didn't know if this was something you had any other background from prior to your arrival here.
No, I think districts are being very proactive in how we're addressing cell phone needs. And even last summer here in Bernie, we adjusted the cell phone policy based on parent feedback. And every week, there's more districts that are joining the lawsuit.
Ms. Palmer, so if I understand correctly, the lawsuit is not predicated on that social media is bad,
Correct.
but that they are targeting kids with advertising. So it's very similar like when Big Tobacco got sued. Nobody argued that tobacco was bad, and it's still legal to sell it. It would still be legal to do social media. It's just that the algorithms and the advertising are targeted towards kids.
Correct. It's the
get them
algorithms,
addicted.
Yes. And part of what they're predicating this on is that the whistleblowers had already come forward for Facebook, for example, and had already testified before Congress admitting that the algorithms are addictive and that they were intentionally creating the addictive nature of that. But then they're targeting the youth to create that addiction. And with 1481 specifically, you know, if that is signed, we're going to have a whole nother battle because our kids are addicted. And if you even have conversations with kids and propose that we wouldn't be able to have the cell phones, there is angst associated with that. They are panicked. So that's going to be not just from a rule kind of standpoint, but the mental health standpoint. They are addicted to the social media.
I think we just got to be really careful about, you know, suing businesses. You know, that goes against everything I believe in. But, you know, it's in the sense that they're trying to do it, then, you know, and get kids addicted, I would be in favor of that.
I agree. Do we need to take action on this today, Dr. Kraft?
No, today we wanted to just have the discussion with you, and it will inform our next steps. And so sounding like there's interest, you'll see this as an agenda item at our meeting next week on Monday.
Thank you, Ms. Palmer.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, next we have our budget workshop, and we will head down to the table for that section. Okay, so for our budget workshop, a quorum of the BISD Board of Trustees may be in attendance, which we are. This is not a regularly scheduled meeting of the BISD Board of Trustees, but this notice is being posted in compliance with the Texas Open Meetings Act. No action can be taken by the BS Board during this workshop.
All right, thank you, President Schmidt. And so first of all, I just want to say again, thank you to our board for being flexible all summer long. We're just 2 weeks into the summer vacation, and I appreciate your flexibility in meeting this morning because we needed to make sure that we had the session close so that we had the most recent information for you all to consider. So I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Scott, and there'll be a number of us presenting throughout the workshop today.
Thank you, Dr. Kraft. Morning, everybody. It's time for our fifth and final budget workshop before budget adoption next week. Let's dive right in. We've got a couple of folks that I may rely upon to answer questions today. If y'all remember, for members that were on the board, Clayton Benford from McCall, Parkhurst, and Horton is here with us today. He is our bond and election counsel. And so he may need to answer some questions as we dive into today. We're going to talk a little bit about the legislation that's been passed in the last session. We're going to focus on House Bill 2. It's the only one I'll mention by name. We'll talk about some of the property tax legislation, but the focus today will certainly be on legislation that impacts school finances. We're going to talk about our budget recommendations from the standpoint of some local funding opportunities we may need to take advantage of. We're going to introduce to you the CSFP, or the Competitive Strategic Financial Plan, and then we're going to give you the recommendations for the general debt service account budgets, and then we're going to have one little discussion related to a potential revenue item of rental rates, and I do have Patricia Flores from our maintenance group here today. That's the day-to-day expert in all things facility rentals that can answer any in-depth questions you might have. But let's talk about House Bill 2. Governor Abbott is really proud of what he did, and from a certain standpoint, it really provided a lot of money to public education, and we're thankful for what it provided. The center pole of that legislation was teacher compensation, and for 80% of our current teachers, they're going to get the biggest raise that they'll ever receive, certainly since I've. All right, now let's talk about how House Bill 2 affects Bernie ISD and what we know right now. Our estimate of the teacher retention allotment, which was the $2,500 for teachers with 3 to 4 years of experience, and $5,000 for teachers with 5 or more years of experience, that'll be $3 million that we'll get from the state for teacher compensation. So that will be a revenue that we recognize and an offsetting expenditure that we recognize. They instituted the support staff allotment that provides $45 per ADA for all other personnel that are non-administrative, right? And so that's a $470,000 estimate. The House Bill 2 does provide for special education initial evaluations, and that's $1,000 per evaluation. We have that estimate at $450,000 to be conservative, but keep in mind that the district has done over 600 initial evaluations the last 2 years. The school safety allotment was increased by $10 a student, and they increased it, they more than doubled the per campus allotment for school safety by $8,540. That total is $33,540, and then we anticipate that'll be a $350,000 add to the district. The House Bill 2 did implement the allotment for basic costs, which is $106 per enrolled student, and that's to cover employer payroll costs not covered by the retention allotment, for inflation and all manner of other costs to the tune of $1.1 million. And then they did increase the basic allotment by $55, which if you add that impact all the weights associated that are where the basic allotment is a part of the formula for those weights, that's a $940,000 increase in revenue. But they did freeze the Austin yield for tier 2 pennies, or the 5 golden pennies that the district does currently have at last year's levels. That's a $150,000 loss in funding. And the one that's most critical to Bernie ISD in terms of House Bill 2 is that House Bill 2 eliminated the hold harmless for compression loss, and that knocks $2.4 million off of our House Bill 2 gain. So what we did gain is almost half of it was taken away by the loss of that hold harmless. There are very few districts in the state. Estimates range anywhere between 10 to 50 districts that are impacted by this, and just some examples, and I can show that a little bit later because we're gonna do some comparisons to other districts. But we know Leander was a big loser like us in this. Bandera, San Marcos, Northwest up in Fort Worth were some of the districts that lost out because of the elimination of that harmless. There is one section of House Bill 2 called 48.011, and that does give the governor the latitude to make districts whole for unintended consequences. We do not know at this point in time what that process looks like. If a loss like this would be considered, and how much it would be for, and how long we could depend on it. So I have not incorporated 48.011 into anything that I'm presenting to you today because I really don't have anything to base it on. Okay.
Mr. Scott, do you mind explaining, since we have several guests here today, why we're susceptible to hold harmless and what that means for us?
Yes, ma'am. So it's really difficult to design a solution for over 1,000 school districts and over 1,400 educational entities when you include the charter schools that the state funding formula provides funding to. So you make a design and you implement it, and in 22-23, when the last legislative session in 2023, they compressed the tax rate 18 cents. Right, it was a massive compression, which worked out for a lot of school districts. Bernie just falls in one of those weird places where it impacted us a lot more than they intended it to, and so they put a hold harmless in place that said if we hadn't, the intention of all that compression was that you would reduce the local share of what the school districts provided, and you would increase the state share. And by whatever nuance of the state funding formula, the state share didn't increase as much as it should have for us. And in those cases, or those few districts that it didn't work that way, they put a hold harmless in place that says this is what that should have done. Does that make sense? There have been a number of hold harmlesses that have been created over the years, and there seems to be a thought that over time people forget why the hold harmlesses were put in place, and there becomes this sentiment in Austin that says we need to wean these school districts off of these hold harmlesses. They are living off these. If they would, they need to get off of these and survive with what we intended to provide them, and they forget that it didn't do what it was supposed to do. That seems to be what happens every time. And there are probably others that have a much better perspective on that than me, but that's what I see. Any other questions or comments about this?
The hold harmless.
Yes, ma'am.
What is it of the hold harmless that our district is? Why are we because I know what the taxes were supposed to do. What makes us not follow the formula and the state funding do what it's supposed to do?
There are these weird spots in the state funding formula, and I wish I could explain it better than I'm fixing to try to explain.
Okay.
But if you're not paying recapture, you weren't impacted by this. If you're paying a lot of recapture, you're not really impacted by this. If you're in the spot where you're identified as a recapture district like we are, but you're not paying, it impacts us negatively. And that's my best attempt at an explanation. Yes. Yeah.
Rich, you're just answering a little bit of the question, but it's what I wanted to ask. I think you had reached out to Dr. Campbell's office, Senator Campbell's office, about the negative impact of this, and there was just no response from them?
No, actually, they were very responsive. A little bit of background in Senate Bill 4, the hold harmless was in the version that was sent from the Senate over to the House. So when the House debated the hold harmless issue, we reached out to our two state reps, DeRazio and Troxclair. They filed an amendment that had been sent to us by Mo Casey, and it was adopted 142 to nothing. So that protected us in the tax bill. But then when it came back to House Bill 2, in negotiations between the House and the Senate, we think it was somewhere on the House side, the negotiator from there got it back in as a way to free up some money to pay for House Bill 2, which is now $8.5 billion, not $8 billion. So, oh golly gee, these 10 or 20 districts suffer. And that was in a 455-page amendment. You know, you have to pass the bill to find out what's in it. That's kind of what happened. So, Senator Campbell's office has been very responsive, and she does not want to see us be hurt by some odd quirk. So, as Wes indicated, the procedure to appeal this isn't firm yet, but we have to wait till certified tax values come in at the end of July, right, Wes? And then I think it should be more clear. But certainly in adopting a budget, to Wes's point, we cannot assume that any or all of this will come back to us. We can appeal, we can hope. Yeah.
Okay, so I missed the last part then. So they had responded. It just has to go through the appeal process. Okay.
If y'all will think back to the 2023 legislative session, there was a ton of property tax legislation in that session that nobody really knew how to interpret it, and it was difficult to get into place. The appraisal districts didn't have an idea of what to do with it, and the impacts we're still feeling today, right? We had nobody knew what was going to happen with the frozen levies as a result of what they did in 23, and we didn't know the impact of it until January of 25, right? We had that big 7-figure adjustment back to our revenues once they fully understood what was going on. When that happened, we went back and went through our property tax council, Linebarger, and they asked the comptroller to re-examine the 23 frozen values that were the first values impacted by this legislation. And when we got news back, and this is very, very unofficial, so nobody take this to the bank, but I think I've got another 1.7 million that we're going to have to be able to recognize in 24-25 because of the continued understanding of how to implement this legislation. That being said, at least it got done in June this year, right? There were so many special sessions that made it really hard on everybody at the time. So hopefully we'll, but there is going to be things like 48001 that's going to take time to figure out what's going to happen. There's some property tax legislation that I'll talk about later on that's going to unpack the frozen levy again. We really don't know how it's going to impact. We'll see.
Well, Wes, one more thing, and Carl, in answer to your question before, Senator Campbell asked her education staff to reach out to us and say, how did we miss this? And the reality is, I don't think there's any way they would have known it, because what the Legislative Budget Board provides to legislators is one figure. And it was like close to $5.5 million. So all they saw was, oh, Bernie's going to get $5.5 million. What Wes is showing is the detailed 60 or 70 step process to determine our funding via a tool that Mo Casey or TASBO uses. And so we have an accurate number and the legislators don't. So there's no way they would have known this absent us telling them that. So their reaction was, well, that wasn't our intent. Well, yeah, then do something about it.
Oh yeah, and then there's some folks put in some nice graphics for me to point out the important parts that I didn't use. Sorry about that. All right, so just to give a feel for how this has impacted Bernie ISD and in that it was good for a lot of districts. Here is District 25, Senate District 25. I went and took all of Mo Casey's runs from as of May 31st and I put them in there, and you can see in orange that I also took the state average, which was just under $700 per ADA. Bernie in purple is way down there on the bottom, and Senate District 25, we are the absolute lowest district as far in terms of benefit per ADA. There were 3 other districts that were hit as hard as we are. San Marcos, Leander were in the same position that we were, where they got impacted by the hold harmless for districts impacted by compression. And then Kamal got hit, and I don't think they don't get that hold harmless. I believe this goes back to additional local exemptions that Kamal had given to their taxpayers a long time ago that continues to bite them. But regardless, even if somebody like San Marcos got a lower gain in House Bill 2, you can see their funding per student is significantly higher. That we are at $9,800, and San Marcos is up at $11,300. And if we had that same funding, we would have almost $16 million additional dollars in our budget.
All right, so before we go further, I want to take us back a few months, because we spent a good part of this year in our Budget Strategy Advisory Committee. We had over 75 community members apply. We landed with around 35 community members, and 3 of our trustees were part of this group. We had fantastic conversation, and we were preparing what happens if the state doesn't act. Because we are a fast growth district, and we have to be prepared and know all of our information, study the recommendations. And really, these are slides back from October. What will Bernie ISD do if we are absent legislation? And no one, could have predicted where we landed. House Bill 2 does a lot of great things for the entire state, but it does not help Bernie ISD, just as Mr. Scott has shared. So in my first 6 months here in my Listen and Learns, parents told me their biggest concern and top priority is that Bernie ISD has the best teachers. We need the best teachers to support our students. And so here I want you to take a look at some data. Thank you, Mr. Senna. He's always tracking this kind of data. So these are pay scales from 24-25. Bernie ranks 15th out of 21 school districts in the area. For starting pay, we dropped to 16th at the 5-year mark, and we dropped further to the 19th spot of our 10-year mark. And here you can see Bernie ranks 18th out of 21 school districts at the 15 and 20-year mark. We fall to 19th place at the 25-year mark, and we rise to the 13th place at the 30-year mark. I share all of this with you just as a reminder of teachers have the biggest impact on our students. And I know your priority has always been compensation for our employees. And just taking us back to our committee charge, we charge the committee with assessing and prioritizing, understanding our needs. What can we do to be more efficient, but what do we need to be doing to position ourselves for the future with that charge? And again, this was a slide that we used in almost every meeting. What are we going to do if the state doesn't act? And so we have done significant capacity building and making some adjustments. And I'm very proud of our team who has identified almost 1.5 million in reductions. So we have been conservative, we have been responsible, and our central office teams, the chiefs around the table, everyone is seeing reductions. Everyone. From positions that are unfilled, to doing the work differently, to absorbing vacancies and getting the job done. We have not taken any kind of reduction at the campus level by design. All reductions have to happen here first. So we have been very responsible in planning for the next school year, and we identified 1.5 million. But as you've seen, House Bill 2 still does not adequately address our needs. So you challenged us, and I'm so glad that you did months ago. You, our board, challenged us. What do we truly need to be competitive in the marketplace? Knowing all of our other school districts are already pushing ahead with their compensation plans. And of course, the smaller districts are getting more dollars. And so we have to be ready to build our plan that puts compensation front and center. So what we're going to be spending some time today is talking about a competitive and strategic financial plan for the future, really grounded in retaining and recruiting quality staff. We want the best teacher in every classroom. We want the best staff member in every position. And you all have studied the salary scales. You all know we have work to do. So our plan that we're putting forward is we want to be able to increase starting teacher pay to $60,000. That's significant. We want to increase starting pay for paraprofessional positions, starting pay at $16 an hour. Increase auxiliary positions to $15 an hour. Increase all other professional positions by 3%. And when you do that, you also have to be adjusting pay steps and salary scales. We also want to be able to deploy a retention initiative for strategic stipends and increase our district contribution to healthcare premiums. So there's a lot of work that has to happen to make sure that Boerne can retain and attract the type of teachers and staff that we want serving our community. Part of our strategic financial plan is also building in dollars to help establish a capital replacement fund plan. And then also, we need to be able to pivot quickly. We are a fast growth district. Every year, we're having to add staff, not only for enrollment, but also for program growth. And one in particular is P-TECH. So as we grow P-TECH, we have to add additional teaching positions to make sure that they're able to meet those needs. We also need to be able to address inflationary pressures that have not disappeared with the passing of House Bill 2.
Dr. Kraft, if I
Yes,
could
sir.
just add, you see at the top, retain and recruit quality staff. Close to 85% of our budget is payroll, whether it's salaries, benefits, et cetera. And so it makes perfect sense that the vast overwhelming majority of any additional revenue to meet a competitive and strategic financial plan goes to staff. I mean, it's really, you're not talking about extra positions there. You're talking about adequately paying those that we have.
Exactly. And we have done great work this year. We started with increasing our bus driver pay by $3 an hour, and that solved the problem that we were facing with transportation. We also came to you with a recommendation on increasing hourly pay by $1.25, I believe. And that has helped us to retain our folks. We all know Buc-ee's is coming to town, and we have to be building incrementally compensation that will keep our employees here. So we're very excited about this, but we do know there's other conversations that need to be a part of it. I'm going to hand it back over to Wes to talk about a local funding opportunity.
Okay. I just wanted to throw out, Mr. Benford is available with us for another 20 minutes. So I'm going to talk about some things that you might want to ask him questions about. And if you do, keep that in mind. He can answer them for the next 20. Just a quick history lesson on Boerne ISD taxes, and this is taxes just for the general fund, the maintenance and operations rate. The blue represents the tax rate that's provided to us by the Texas Education Agency, and then the red would be the golden pennies that provides our Tier 2 funding. That's been compressed through this year, almost 38 cents, and we project next year that will be compressed another almost 4 cents, so that the total M&O rate for 25 tax year would be about 63 cents. Golden pennies. They provide our Tier 2 funding. They provide, next year we're anticipating that they'll provide just a little under $1 million in tax collections and almost $500,000 in state funding. Remember that the state has a matching aspect, for lack of a better word, right, that says that we're going to get what the Austin ISD would get with the Tier 2 penny. And that's what everybody around the state is guaranteed. That's called a guaranteed yield. It's not going to be called a guaranteed yield anymore because the House Bill 2 froze that amount that they will add on to a penny. And to the extent that one of our pennies gets less than 1.44 million in this circumstance, we would get additional state funding to bring us there. Once if our values grew to the point that it surpassed that, we would not get that state funding anymore. Okay.
Wes, I have a question.
Yes, sir.
The 957,000 per penny, is that figure the same whether it's tier 1 or tier 2?
That figure is the same whether it's tier 1 or tier 2. And that number's come down a little bit because we were getting a little bit over $1 million. And I think in Finance Committee we had talked about projections, but the tax, there were several pieces of tax legislation that impacts taxes dramatically this year. One is the homestead increase from 100 to 140,000. One is the elimination of personal property from taxation, and the other is the quintupling of the over 65 disabled exemption from $10,000 to $60,000. So those three things right there are $1 billion off of our taxable value. Copper pennies are, once again, you would bring in just a little under $1 million in tax collections. You lose state funding when you adopt copper pennies, so there's an offset there, and then you pay recapture on top of that. So that would be to the tune of $430,000 per penny for a net gain per penny of around $380,000. Here is a detailed. Okay. So Bernie ISD right now has 5 of the 8 available golden pennies, but we do have 3 golden pennies left on the table that would bring in an additional $4.3 million, and we have 9 copper pennies left on the table that would total about $3.9 million for a total of $8.1 million. Here is a detailed breakout of the impact of each penny. And you can see that in the net total impact column, that the 3 pennies total to the $4.3 million that I talked about, and the 9 pennies would total to $8.4 million. Just by the way, if you're doing math, the 9th penny that I reran my template time and time again. That 9th copper penny, that increase, you'll see that 681,000. That doesn't make sense in relation to any of the other pennies. So I don't really trust that 9th penny. But we're not really here to talk about copper pennies, so I'm not worried about that. But what I want you to focus on and understand is that the bang for your buck are in golden pennies. That you have to, if you look at the increase to M&O property tax collections at $2.8 million for 3 pennies, and the increase to property tax collections for the 9th copper penny at $11.4 million, you've got to that's all over 4 times more property tax collections to get almost twice as much money. I mean, there's just not much bang for the buck for burning ISD copper. Okay, here is a very nice. Sorry.
So I agree with your statement that there's not enough bang for the buck on the copper pennies. I think the other side of that statement is it would be a poor use of taxpayer dollars to have to give a third of it back to the state. That would be horrible for us to do to our taxpayers.
Agreed. Okay. Rich Senna actually provided this display, and I appreciate his work on that. That would show the impact of adopting 3 pennies, what our tax rate would look like. Some of the details of that I'll talk about a little bit more later. That you'd see that if the board was to call a voter-approved tax ratification election, that, and I'll probably have to use my handy laser pointer here. But for the average taxpayer, without a Vader, the tax rate we would project at 95 cents. And the annual savings from the prior year, when you count in compression, the result of the savings would actually be $312 for the average home. With a Vader, which would be a 2-cent increase, because what administration is proposing today, I'll give you a preview of upcoming slides. What we're proposing is that the board consider pursuing the 3 golden pennies through a voter-approved tax ratification election and giving up a penny out of the INS rate. So that would be a 2-cent net increase. Would be savings of $217 for the average.
Okay, to add to that a little bit, what this factors in is the increase in the average appraised value home, which didn't go up much this year, went up only from 666 to 667, but the average taxable value, it factors that in. So as people are limited to 10% increases each year, that took the average taxable value from 606 to 632. So in a normal year, people would be paying more property taxes at the same rate. But between the increase in the homestead exemption and the reduction in the tax rate, that's what leads to them actually paying $312 less than they would for the average home. And that's on the left side for those under 65. On the right side, that's for those over 65. And remember, about 30% of our homeowners in Bernie ISD are 65 or over. And if they filed a homestead exemption, their average savings would be $771 without a Vader, $687 with a Vader. And if you went back to 2018, before the serious tax compression occurred, you're looking at savings much more than this. People are paying, the average homeowner in Bernie ISD would be paying about $1,500, about almost $1,000 less than they were 6 years ago, and the average senior would be spending $1,500 less. So this is phenomenal tax relief for our taxpayers as a result of all this state legislation. Conversely, people are paying a lot more in city and county taxes. So remember that when different elected officials talk about how much of a friend they are to the taxpayer, okay?
While we have your expertise, I know you're on a time crunch. Could you explain a little bit about what a Vader would mean for us here in BISD as far as the timing? Is it a 50 plus 1% voter turnout that we would need or win that we would need there and so forth?
Certainly. So Clay Benford representing the district as bond counsel. This is a typical election that would be held on a uniform date, and it would be a simple majority based on the turnout of the electorate. There are conditions precedent that this board must take in order to trigger the election requirements. It's important to note that the election, where it is permissive if you were to, for example, call a bond election, you make a determination to call an election, and that's a board action. The Vader election requirements are actually prescriptive if you do certain things relative to your budget. So you adopt a budget that supports a tax levy that exceeds the voter confirmation threshold, and then it triggers an automatic election requirement that you put that to the voters on the next uniform election date for them to confirm or ratify the election or the tax rate that you adopted. Mr. Scott might talk about this. It is a little bit of a reverse engineered process. Because you are going to adopt a budget that relies upon the revenue from a tax rate that requires the electorate in the future to approve. Now, if the electorate rejects the tax rate that was adopted, then you roll back to what the election or what the tax rate could have been without triggering the election requirement, which in this case would be the 2-cent differential.
And it's a 50 plus 1% win?
Correct.
It doesn't have to be 3/4?
Does not.
Will all the if this was do all 3 pennies show up as one item on the ballot, or is it each individual penny is individually listed on the ballot?
It would be a single proposition with a single dollar amount and tax rate. Now, it is going to be a little bit interesting because we'll have to think about how you model in the INS rate as providing property tax relief. One thing that we would have to communicate with your staff is, do you want to risk that 1 penny on the INS side if the voters reject your tax rate? Because once you adopt a levy for a debt service tax rate, you're actually not voting on a 2-cent increase, or you are voting on a 3-cent increase, because we need to make sure that we communicate that to the voters, that you have a net impact of 2 cents, but what is at risk to the operating budget are the 3 pennies that you're including on the M&O side. So you could be in a disadvantageous position to where you voluntarily gave up a penny on your INS side, and then you cannot recoup that, even if the voters reject the 3-cent M&O increase.
But we as a board, a year later, could revert back to the original INS tax rate.
Certainly.
Right.
Yes, and we do have strategies to where you can preserve the ability to maintain your INS tax rate. And what we have done in the past, and we have not had these conversations with district staff, is that we would approve the INS rate at what would be your standard rate, assuming that the election failed. But we would have a provision in your tax levy that said, in the event that the VATR is successful, meaning that the voters approve or ratify your election, that the INS rate would automatically drop by a penny. And so that way, if you get the 2-cent increase and not anymore, but you do not risk your INS rate. So the way that it would work is you would adopt your INS rate at your standard, or whatever it would be, the penny higher, and you would also adopt your M&O tax at the 3-cent increase. And then based on the results of the election, if the M&O rate is rejected, then it comes back 3 cents, but you adopted your INS at the standard rate, so it's a 2-cent net impact to the taxpayers. If they approve your M&O rate, then the INS rate, by determination of the board at the time that you call the election, would automatically drop by a penny, so it's again the same 2-cent impact. But that way you haven't risked the INS dollars unnecessarily by under levying and utilizing general fund, or fund balance for what you would do to make up the debt service shortfall. So a lot of strategy here. It's very confusing. Some of the things that we are going to have to communicate to your voters are net tax rate impact, and the ability, I thought the idea for it being a difficult proposition for your electorate and your taxpayers to go for copper pennies. Conversely, it is a leverage, a way to generate additional greater than 100% local value for your golden pennies. So very much an educational process to your electorate.
And very much keeping it a very simple story to tell the voter, because any initiative, I believe, even on a VATR, requires the language, this is a tax increase, which really is a shame to be forced into the position by state law, because the average homeowner, property owner, is going to see a tax reduction, just a little bit less of a reduction.
That's correct.
And for the only A-rated district in the San Antonio area to be the lowest funded, this sounds like, this doesn't sound like a meritocracy at all, There's no correlation between how Texas funds its public schools and academic achievement. There's minimal correlation.
I don't know if you have the answer for this, but whenever we sit and talk with other school board members and places, I kind of see that they're shocked that we are not utilizing all the golden pennies. And I'm shocked whenever I hear a school board member that they're utilizing copper pennies. I'm like, whoa, what's going on? Do we have an idea of, the percentages of districts that are utilizing these, aren't utilizing their copper pennies, where we stand on the usage?
I really don't know that. We have an elections department that does track statistics, but there's usually a bit of a lag. And we have not traditionally tracked the results of VADERS because oftentimes, as bond counsel, we don't know the answer to this. Well, looks like you have a slide on that already. So, as it's going on behind me, right? But there are many districts that are getting over the political, I guess, the turmoil and the torture to staff and the local community go through elections, particularly on the tax increase side. That's always been a difficult proposition that many districts have tried to avoid at all costs until it's absolutely necessary. Go over the slide.
But to add to your point, Dripping Springs is a district that we compare ourselves a lot to in terms of funding, academic achievement, et cetera. They have not only used all their golden pennies, they've used some copper pennies. And I've spoken to them and I'm like, why do you do that? Well, they were so desperate. They felt they were so desperate, they went after some copper pennies, even though they give up half of that to the state in recapture. But to Carlin's point before, that is not a good use of taxpayer dollars at all.
Wes, one thing you mentioned, actually, I think, Clay, you mentioned it. If you could go back a couple of slides to the golden penny and copper penny impact. One more slide back, I think it is. Okay, 2. There we go. So the multiplication factor that comes into this, it's not just increasing our local tax revenue, it's the part that the state kicks in that I think is extremely important to make sure the community understands. So we're getting a 50% benefit back from the state just for utilizing local revenue.
You know, another thing, Dallas, because people will ask, well, why haven't you had a golden penny election before? Well, it was in 2019 that the legislature said you can go from 4 pennies to 8 pennies. You're going to get 1 penny for free, but you can't do it in 2019. You got to wait a year. So we waited a year and we grabbed that 5th penny. But then after that, you'd have to get voter approval. Well, now you're coming up on 22 when we had a bond election. Not a good time to have a Vader for golden pennies. And then in 23, we expected the legislature to act and increase funding. They did not. So hence, here we are. So but anytime you do a Vader and go after a few pennies, it's great to merge it with a time when the tax rate's going to go down and the homestead value exemption is going to go up. So there's a savings to the taxpayer.
Totally concur. I think the penny fit formula is comical to me and really funny. I feel that maybe as a first grader that came up with a great idea, first grade teacher, a great idea, then state government took control of it and made it whatever it is. The story I want to make sure is told, though, is recapture. Because if we're going to increase something, I've had a lot of people talk to me, well, we're in a recapture. We're in a recap. This doesn't, and I want to make sure whatever I say, please tell me if I'm correct. This, if we were to get more golden pennies, that doesn't open us up to giving any more money that leaves our district anywhere else. Correct?
Golden pennies are protected from recapture.
And I think that's a very, very important story to tell in our community, that we're not opening ourselves up for money to leave our district.
Well, thank you. Does anybody else have a question? Sarah, are you good? Sounds like it's a true community-wide initiative here. So I'm assuming, I would hope we would get a lot of teacher voter turnout and that it would be successful. So thank you.
With this Vader, does it cover, would we be able to do this competitive and strategic financial plan? Will we be able to meet all those goals?
We're gonna talk about that in detail in just a.
Okay, I got excited.
Yeah. Okay. Well, it is 10:30, so we want to honor Mr. Benford's time and really appreciate you coming by. And he'll be helping us out a lot, especially over the next week as we get towards budget adoption. And you guys safe travels, sir. All right, but to answer one of the questions that was put forward, this is a slide showing 2024 results. All these numbers are straight from the TA website on general fund spending per ADA. You'll see Bernie way down there on the bottom again. It's worth noting, as was mentioned before, that we're the only A-rated district and we have the least financial support per pupil. 70% of the districts up there, the ones that are in blue and red, have taken advantage either of their available golden pennies or copper pennies on top of it.
Do we have any statistics? I don't know any district that's not using all 5 golden pennies. Are there any out there?
I am not aware of any school district that doesn't have all 5 pennies. All right. Just to touch on capital replacement, we've talked about this before, but because of the place that we landed on that really low general fund spending per ADA, year to year, we're not able to meet capital replacement needs since we started paying recapture almost 20 years ago. This is very typical for a district in this position. Capital replacement needs cannot be addressed on a regular basis. We've got bond elections that certainly help with that greatly. We've got fund balance every once in a while that we can use, interest earnings that we can use every once in a while. But year to year, we have had nothing budgetarily set aside for capital replacement needs. And these are going to be things that we want to be ready for, such as rooftop units being replaced before they expire. Rooftop units expiring. Taking care of our white fleet. Just informationally, we had 2 of our maintenance trucks go out this month. One of them was a 2007 maintenance truck that is no longer usable at this point in time unless we invest about $25,000 to get it back on the road. But here are some of the replacement needs that are normal for a school district to address. And just informationally, that last one, painting a school costs at least $100,000. All right. Okay, 25-26 budget recommendations. Go back through our assumptions again really quick. We're still projecting enrollment of 11,237 based on our demographer's reduced projection. That would result in ADA of 10,562. The property values and levies have changed substantially from the last time I showed this. So even though market values did go up 5%, the taxable values show an actual decrease, and that's the $1 billion that I talked about from the property tax legislation. That would result in even with the 3 golden pennies, because the $72.2 million M&O levy includes the 3 golden pennies, that is that levy is $3.6 million lower than the 24-25 levy, and the INS levy models the 1 penny decrease, and that would show a $2.4 million decrease with all the property tax legislation that's gone into play. Okay, and our administration's proposal is an adoption of the VADR, which would include the 3 pennies to get the M&O rate to 66 cents. That's a 1.7 cent decrease from the prior year, and the INS rate at 31.4, which would be a 1 penny decrease, keeping in mind what Mr. Benford just talked about a little bit earlier. Okay, so we take all those assumptions into play. The revenues for 25-26 at this point in time would result in $116 million. When we carry forward payroll costs that we would carry forward from last year, these would all be recurring costs. Carry forward non-payroll costs of just under $18 million, and we incorporate the $1.5 million in budget efficiencies that we found that was mentioned earlier related to PSAC. We would have just under $9 million in available funding, and that's when we would talk about that. At this point in time, let's keep in mind what the that $8.9 million, and I'm going to turn this over to Ms. Jill, and she's going to talk about compensation considerations.
So a couple of the things that we wanted to consider, if you've been reading about House Bill 2 legislation, it does not include teachers, or sorry, does not include nurses, librarians, and instructional coaches who we currently have on our STEP scale. So the district has two options. The option would be for us to locally fund them at the same levels as our teachers, or to remove them and create a new STEP scale where they would receive a percentage increase similar to our professionals. We are recommending that we continue to pay them on the teacher STEP scale simply because we don't want to lose those individuals if they are not being compensated at the same level. So the cost to pay them on the STEP scale is approximately $200,000 if we keep them. We also gave you just the figures to show what it would look like if we did a 1%, a 2%, or a 3%, right? So the recommendation there is to maintain them on the STEP scale. House Bill 2 also does not address those teachers in basically their second and third years, so on step 1 and 2. And so we are recommending for those teachers on step 1 and 2, we have approximately 55, to do $1,000 increase for those teachers. So there is something there, so they get some sort of increase. In terms of our professional staff, you can see the figures there to do a 1%, 2%, or 3% increase based on our House Bill 2 dollars that we'll be receiving. We are recommending a 2% increase for all other professional staff. And then we looked at our hourly and which includes our auxiliary and our paraprofessional staff. It does not include our child nutrition staff because child nutrition increases come out of the child nutrition funds. But we looked, since they received a $1.25 increase in January, we are not recommending a percentage increase. We looked at different levels. You can see there the 5-cent increase. So basically every 5 cents for this group is about $33,000. So what we're recommending is a 25% increase per hour, which is approximately $163,000.
Now, Jill,
I'm sorry.
would that change, like right now, our starting pay for, I think it was custodians or teacher assistants was $13.20. We added the $1.25 on, so it went to $14.45. Would this then change the pay scale to $14.70 as a starting figure? It
We would make the adjustments on the pay scale so that if we brought people in, we're not bringing people in with a similar number of years at less pay than our incumbents.
So this just gets us closer to that $15 an hour minimum. Okay.
Just closer to $15. Do you have a question, Christy?
That was my question. Thank you.
And then the other piece that we looked at was our healthcare and employer payroll costs. So in order for the district to remain ACA compliant, so that's the Affordable Care Act, we want to make sure that we incorporate an increase to the employer contribution. But then also we have those payroll costs that would increase based on increased levels of pay. So the recommendation there is to adopt an amount equivalent to maintaining our ACA compliance and the payroll costs that would be associated with these increased amounts. So that's at $433,000. Okay. Any other questions on this slide?
So if we're at if we're trying to get them to 1470, could you just maybe in the future let us know what the price difference would be to just get them to the 196?
Yeah, so part of the information we'll share with you on the competitive and strategic budget includes that getting them to $15, what the cost would be. The other piece I wanted to share with you is just, as you guys are aware, TRS did approve a 10-cent increase, and I've shared before that we don't really have any way to predict this. We have to, by December 31st of each year, indicate that we are continuing forward with TRS, and we don't get the rates for the next school year until June. So we got these on June 3rd. And so you can see the annual increase based on the 10% increase. It's approximately $690,000 increase in premiums for our employees. One of the things that we heard in HR was last year, we had about a 14% increase. This year it's a 10% increase. We heard from our employees that a lot of them were actually making less. this year because of the 14% increase. And so now in 2 years, we've had almost a 25% increase in health premiums. So you'll see in the competitive and strategic budget some of our recommendations to help offset that.
You know, Jill, if I could add to that, what was interesting, because Jill shared earlier this year the complaints that HR would get from folks regarding the increased premiums. And because we had a very, very tight budget this year, we were not able to increase our contribution to healthcare premiums. Now, if you look at the 9-year history of our healthcare situation, I'd say close to 80% of the premium increase since 2015 has been covered by the district in increased premium support to people, to our employees, almost 80%. Well, a couple of years ago, when TRS went from Aetna back to Blue Cross came in with a low price leader rate, and they actually reduced the rates. And I remember we discussed it at the time, but didn't act on it. Well, perhaps that would have been a time to actually reduce our contribution, because what happened was employees saw a significant reduction in a decent reduction in their healthcare premiums. We did a 3% raise. And I remember bringing the point up. I'm like, well, don't, you're doing a double raise this year, but they're going to come back and hit us with rate increases, because what they did was come in with a low price, knowing that they're going to have to jack up premiums. Health carriers do this all the time. It's really egregious. Well, that's exactly what happened. So we had a 1-year sugar rush where our employees got a 3% raise and a reduction in their healthcare costs, and then they paid that all back and then some in the next 2 years. So when you consider healthcare costs, you really have to look at it from a 5-year perspective, and any discussion we have on looking outside of TRS has to be done through the lens of what do we think is going to happen over the next 5 years, and how does that impact our costs, and how does it impact our employees. But Jill, I'm glad to see that you're recommending an increase, because this has been a killer to our employees.
Do we know how many people are using this? I just want to make sure. Are we talking 90% of our employees or staff?
We have about 70% of our employees who take health insurance. We have 921 employees out of about our 1,400 that take health insurance. One of the things that we'll be looking at this year is we do want to survey those employees who aren't taking our insurance to understand why. We know we have a lot of military, retired military, and other areas, but for my department, we really want to understand, is it because of the premiums, or is it because as a military spouse or retired military spouse, there's no additional cost if they maintain that? And so we'll be digging into that a little more this next year.
And one other thought, Dallas, is when you look at what the employee, if it's employee alone, what they have to pay is really not a lot of money. I think it's like $88 or something like that for the lowest, $91 right now for the lowest cost plan. Unless you're an hourly worker making $15,000, $16,000, that's just not a lot of money. Where it gets expensive is when you add your spouse in or your entire family. Even employee kids is not bad. It's not a bad premium. So I think Jill's right. You have a lot of retired people. You have some on Medicare. They're over 65. They're on Medicare. So there's a lot of reasons why. But imagine if we picked up a couple hundred more employees. That's $1 million cost all of a sudden. Holy smokes. So
How long are we locked into TRS, Jill? Because I know that we have other options too.
So we commit to TRS basically annually. If we leave TRS, that's where the challenge comes in. If you leave TRS, you are locked out for 5 years. So we will be exploring with the benefits committee just different options that are available to us so that the district can make an informed decision. But we want to make sure that we've explored all of those options before we make any decision, because it could be a significant financial loss to the district if we get locked out and then a private carrier increases significantly where TRS maintains.
Well, when we've increased 25% in 2 years, I'm like, I don't know, getting locked out of that opportunity might not be the worst thing.
All right, let's talk about compensation comparison estimates, and who's talking about this? Okay, so in our competitive and strategic financial plan, we talked about increasing teacher starting pay to $60,000 under our the House Bill 2 budget, which would be basically what you're looking at here is what we would do with the 3 golden pennies on the right, and if we did not get the 3 golden pennies on the left. So we would increase starting pay for paraprofessionals to $16 an hour and auxiliary positions to $15 an hour. The main purpose of that $16 an hour for our paraprofessional positions, as Dr. Kraft talked a little bit earlier about addressing bus driver needs through compensation. So we as of today, we have very few vacancies in our bus driving positions, right? We did a specific increase to address custodians because we couldn't, we had to provide contracted services because we couldn't fund those positions, and we made a strategic increase in that. As of last week, I think we had 1 custodian position open. The paraprofessionals, this is specifically to address teacher pay and impact the vacancies that we've seen there over the last several years. We would increase professional positions to 3%. We would straighten out the pay scales for the teachers. We would deploy our retention initiative, and we would increase our district contribution to the healthcare premium. If we're not able to pursue those 3 pennies, and what this would look like is you adopt your budget, including the 3 pennies, and you're also going to have resolutions in place, and this is what I'll be working with Mr. Benford for, is specific wording on those resolutions on what happens if the VADR is not successful. And what would happen on the left is what happens if the VADR is not successful. So employee, to the extent that teachers are required to be paid $5,000 by House Bill 2, we'll implement that with a teacher's first paycheck in September, right? To the extent that, and I'm going to make up something, we work with the step scales with our CSFP, and a year 7 teacher would get a raise of the $5,000 and another $900. That would not be reflected in their paycheck until the December paycheck, so that the district isn't committing itself until after the election. That makes sense?
Do you mind if I ask a question?
Yes, sir. Go right
You
ahead.
do? Okay. So I think it'd be a little bit naive to look at this without knowing what other districts around us that are competing with us. Because I would love to honor our staff without that, but I think that's really important to know what other opportunities are out there and what other people are doing. So I don't know, Jill, with HB2, SB2, what are we perceiving that our competitors are going to go to? Because I love where we're at on the right there. That looks really good, but I don't know what our competitors are going to be doing. I know that there's a lot of deficits in surrounding districts that they adopted, and my feeling is probably SB2 didn't get them to where they wanted to be, just like how we are. So are they going to be able to make the steps in teacher pay?
Right now, the only district that has published in the area has been San Antonio ISD. The other districts have not announced what they're doing yet. I have reached out to other districts just to try to get an idea, especially when we were talking about like the nurses, librarians, instructional coaches, and nobody's really saying. I think everybody's playing things really close to the chest because we know how challenging it is hiring right now for teachers. We are in a much better place than most districts in terms of our vacancies. And so I think we're not going to see that released until we start seeing budgets approved. But in terms of just looking at where we are, you saw where our starting pay was compared to like Northside, where we lose a number of staff. Their entry is 60,000. So if you think about what the law says, is you have to apply the 2,500 or 5,000, and that will change the step scale, right? And so then, depending on whether or not we move forward with the CSFP, then it would be the 5,000 plus a little more, because the goal would be that we would adjust our step scale so that it is, it's a little bit more managed. Right now our steps are kind of all over the place, and so we wanted to have more consistency in our steps with a little more of an increase.
1 second. I wanted to make sure, whenever we saw that comparison, I think it's always bad when you're at the bottom of the list. They're usually never good. But something I was looking at is there's only about 5 districts that have a comparable cost of living to what our district has, and that's not really in that comparable, because if you're going to go to the east side of San Antonio or somewhere else that is going to be much cheaper to live there, that difference is much bigger. The gap is wider than what it's even showing there. And I think that's something, that's a story we are going to have to tell to our constituents, that it's not just that we're, bottom 3, but we're probably, when you take cost of living into it, we're really, really much lower than that.
It's interesting you bring that up, because when I did have an opportunity to talk with Comal, just about their hourly pay and different things, that was actually something that they said to me is, our hourly doesn't have to be as high because people can afford to live in our district. And we know that our cost of living is quite a bit higher. So a lot of our hourly staff don't necessarily live in our district. They commute in.
I'm glad to see the issue of pay scales is being addressed, because I think what's happened over the last 5 years or so in our district is in an effort to bring starting pay up to a more competitive level. And even though we're fairly low, we may be $300, $400, $500, $1,000 less than a lot of the other districts. But in an effort to bring our starting pay up, we've compressed the gap between 0 years and 15 years. So our steps are lower than a lot of other districts, which means that even though we may be just a little bit behind at starting, by the time you hit 5 years or 10 years, we're $4 or $5 grand behind, and that's a problem. So I'm glad to see that under the competitive and strategic financial plan, that's going to be addressed and adjusted and funded, so that there's every reason for a 5, 10, 15-year teacher to not only want to stay here, but to come here from the north side. That's important. The other thing, Dallas, to your point, every district's in a different situation. I will bring up Judson as an example. They claim that they're going to have a $48 million deficit approaching next year, but when you take out the incremental money they're going to get from HB2, they're talking about doing a Vader also that would generate, I think, $13 million for them. Well, they're still approaching a $20 million deficit, and they're talking about eliminating librarians. We just fixed libraries in our 4 legacy campuses. Why would we ever entertain getting rid of such a critical position? We wouldn't, okay? But here's a district that is. And why are they in that shape? Because they made a decision prior to any increase in state funding that they were going to be one of the highest paid teachers in the San Antonio area. And they achieved that. But now they're paying for it, and no matter what they get from HB2 or from a Vader, they're still going to have a big fat deficit. Well, they brought that on themselves. We have not taken that approach in our district, and we've lived within our means. And so hopefully with a successful Vader, we'll be able to do a better job and be even more competitive, and I think we will be.
Okay, so here is once again on the right with the 3 golden pennies. This is what we're proposing. Remember the $8.9 million I showed you in available funding from that? That would be the number on the right and top of the screen. The column in the middle that's labeled HB2 would be the budget we would roll back to should A Vader not be successful. And the difference between the 8.9 million and the 4.6 million that you would see there would be the 4.3 million that would come from A Vader, the 3 golden pin. Okay. So the second line, the staffing for enrollment growth, would be the increase in the 130 students that we've presented a number of times. That number has not changed, and we would want that incorporated into both versions of that budget. We need to provide students for enrollment growth. The utilities is primarily related to the opening of the pool. That's not going to change in either budget version. On the budget initiative priorities, we've got a little over $1 million in budget initiative priorities that we want to address in the CSFP, and we would trim that. That would primarily be special education stipends are one of the biggest items in the budget initiative priorities. We would cut those by half on the if the Vader did not fail or did not succeed. For compensation, all the things that we talked about in detail on the slides that Jill talked about before, and that I just talked about in the last screen, would cost $6 million in the CSFP version that we would have to roll back to 3.9 million that we talked about on the left side of the previous screen. And what we're proposing at this point in time is the increase to the healthcare contributions. We would cover the entirety of the increase from TRS Care, since the district has not addressed that in the last several years. If a Vader is not successful, the $250,000 on the column on the left would be what we would need to do to keep our plan in compliance with the Affordable Care Act.
Vince, do you want to mention the consequences if we're not in compliance with the Affordable Care Act?
I would, but I'm going to turn the mic over to our expert on that matter.
So when we do our ACA compliance each year, the federal government determines what an average person should be able to pay for health insurance. For every person that we would be out of compliance, it's approximately $4,400. And so while we could potentially pay a compliance surcharge if we were out of compliance, it just doesn't look good if we're identified as being out of compliance with the Affordable Care Act. So we want to make sure that we stay compliant in that area.
Jill, let me just ask a question about that. So one of the things we've talked about in prior years is, and certainly I want to be in compliance with ADA. That's not the issue. But my understanding is employer contributions to offset healthcare premiums does not count for compensation for retirement calculation purposes. So we've had conversations about while we're decreasing the amount that's coming out of their paycheck for premiums, we're penalizing them for what their retirement calculation comes towards at the end, right?
So you're right. It does not. It's not included as part of their retirement if we increase the employer contribution. Even with that, we received so many complaints about our healthcare premiums this last year. People said, what we were hearing from most of our employees that were calling was that even with the increase, to their salary, they were making less money because our healthcare increased so much. And so I would expect that people, even though it wouldn't apply toward their retirement, people would prefer to have their health care premiums remain more consistent rather than having a big jump in their health care premiums and just having a little bit of extra. Because once we take that money and apply it, if we were to apply that same amount, say $25 a month to their pay, by the time TRS and and taxes and all of those things come out, it's not as much to offset the increase in their healthcare premiums.
Okay, that's a great explanation, and I appreciate that. I think that's good, and I think it higher compensated employees, it makes a bigger difference at the end, right? So I just think we need to make sure we're educating our employees on what that looks like.
I agree, and I think we need to continue to educate over a decade, years of experience, what the experience has been. That's why I mentioned before, close to 80% of the premium increase that our employees have faced, it's been picked up by the district. I don't think many people know that. And I think the problem that was created that Jill's team had to deal with this year was a failure 2 years ago when we got a substantial rate reduction to tweak what we contributed and keeping that in reserve for when the increases come, because they're going to come, and they did. And hence, it's a problem we brought upon ourselves, quite honestly.
And that wasn't you, Jill. You weren't here. The other thing I think this really brings to light is, at some point in time, it may make sense to become a self-insured district. So exploring all those kind of opportunities outside of TRS, self-insured, or other companies, I think is something we ought to really focus on doing so that we have a better way to manage what these costs look like in the long run. So.
Okay, Sarah.
Okay, I want to. So if we were to pass a Vader versus not, it's a $96 difference annually per the graph here. And then when we're talking about this healthcare contribution, that if we don't give them that, how much you said monthly would be the increase to them?
So if we go back, I don't know if you want to go back to the
Is it that 5?
So on there, right there, so I did just the annual increase, right? So that last column, you can see the lowest amount for employee only would be $504 annually. So that ends up being.
So 96 cents to our taxpayers versus $504 per employee. Minimum. So
And you
if
can
we just use that statistic alone,
Like an average statistic.
yeah, we're like
$700.
saving the employees just alone in health benefits astronomically.
Correct.
Okay.
Oh, where'd I go? There we go. There we go. I'll stay there. All right. So, so we're talking about healthcare. We would also want to contribute a $250,000 towards capital replacement. $100,000 towards property insurance, we believe will go up. So that's going to be in both versions. An increase to the campus's non-payroll budgets. They haven't seen an increase in quite some time. So if we're able to get the 3 golden pennies, we would do that. And if we were able to do that, we would have what's effectively a balanced budget. If we're if the Vader is not successful, then what we would recommend would result in a $1 million deficit, which is a manageable deficit. That's nothing new. To Bernie ISD, we have handled significantly bigger deficits than that before, but this is in some form or fashion the numbers that will be reflected in what we bring forward to the board on Monday for the general fund. All right, let's talk about briefly talk about the child nutrition and the debt service fund. I haven't changed anything in the child nutrition budget from the last couple of workshop preparations. Of course, the compensation increases that we've been talking about in the general fund will be applied to the child nutrition fund. Right now, the child nutrition fund is running a surplus. It would absorb those increases to the in payroll, and but from the standpoint of what we're going to be able to charge for our meals next year and what the federal government is going to reimburse us for the children that qualify for free and reduced meals, we're unaware of what those numbers are at this point in time. Any questions about child nutrition? Yes, sir. Yes, sir. It's one of the disadvantages to being a child, a junior end, right? Is in child nutrition. There's a lot of things that you just don't know, but in the general and debt service funds, you know, we're passing a budget before we pass a tax rate, so we don't.
Well, I guess we'll just have to preface it with what we learned from last year, and that was that surplus. I'm looking at these numbers, but which one was the? Well, I know we had a little bit of surplus there.
In the general fund.
Well, the child nutrition portion.
In the child nutrition portion, as of April, we had a $80,000 surplus
Okay.
in year-to-date results.
Okay, so that I'm just wanting to make sure whenever we go into that, we know what the price of lunch is going to be next year. You know, we didn't miss the mark too much.
All right. Debt service, we're currently proposing, qualified by what Mr. Benford said this morning, a 1 cent reduction in the INS tax rate. That would result in a levy of $34.5 million. That would be a $2.1 million lower levy than the prior year. And I'm currently anticipating, since House Bill 19 failed entirely to get forward through the legislature, that we'll be getting about $2.5 million in state monies, and that would bring our budget to $36 million. We currently have, looking at the second, and this is a screen that I've shown several times. This hasn't changed. At the 2026 bar, that shows that we have $24.4 million in required principal and interest payments, which would give us $12 million to dedicate towards the defeasance of the 2016 bonds, so that our ability to save about $7 million is not at this point.
And Wes, didn't we, so for the 16 series, which is due to be redone on February 1st of 26, didn't we also already allocate $4.5 million from the previous year, so that our total defeasance will be probably $16.5 million? Okay, so to put that in perspective, our balance right now is around $76 million on that series. We're going to pay off over 20% of it in one fell swoop next February.
Any questions about the debt service fund? Yes, ma'am.
When they were talking about the golden penny, we were talking about using one of the golden pennies for the INS.
No, remember that we have two components of our tax rate.
Okay.
The maintenance and operations rate that funds the general fund, and the interest and sinking rate that funds the debt service fund. So within, and it gets a little bit complicated, but within the M&O rate, you've got the amount set by the TEA, which was the blue portion of that bar I showed earlier, and the red portion, which is our golden penny. We talked about increasing our golden pennies by 3 pennies, and as a consideration for property tax relief for our taxpayers, lowering the INS rate by.
Okay, that makes sense. Okay.
And the reason that we're able to do that is because of the capacity that I'm showing you here, right? Because if you just look at the graph, the first bar, that what we paid on debt in 25 is what we're comparable to what we're going to get next year. And the difference between that first bar and that second bar is the capacity. So if we lower it by a penny, we're able to meet our debt service requirement for sure. We're going to be able to do good things with the difference, and still have considerations for future bond elections. With that is the primary reason that you really pay attention to capacity.
Okay.
So to your point, Wes, basically our obligations to make the principal and interest payments for all approved bonds is around 25 million, but our revenue between our local tax rate and the state aid is 37 million. Well, that 12 million defeasance will save us millions of dollars of future interest payments. So one could argue, well, you could lower your tax rate. Well, yeah, but we already have the second lowest tax rate. We ought to update this once tax rates are adopted before the Vader, because I believe we had the second lowest INS tax rate of any fast growth district in Austin or San Antonio. And only below us was East Central. They just passed a big bond. I don't think they're going to catch up to us, but they're going to come close. The point is, we're a fast growth district. We got one of the lowest tax rates, second to lowest, and we're going to save millions of dollars of future interest payments. To me, that's being financially responsible.
Okay.
Hey, Wes,
Yes. Yes, sir.
real quick on the INS levy, for every penny that we raise the M&O tax rate, it's like, it was 957,000, I think, in extra local funding. But if we lower the INS tax rate by a penny, our revenue on the INS side drops by over $2 million.
No.
Right?
It'll drop by $1 million.
Oh, it'll be $1 million too. Oh, okay. It says like 34.5 and 36.6.
Mm-hmm.
Is that, is that just because the change in property values
Yes.
also? Okay. Okay, that explains it.
Yeah, it was gonna, if we had kept it the same, it was going to drop a little bit.
So a penny is a penny. Either way you do it, it's about $1 million, a little bit less. Same thing.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Yeah, just in terms of like the local generated funds, right? The local, yeah. Okay.
All right. Our BSAC committee came up with a lot of good recommendations. One of them that was to, one of their charges was to maximize revenue streams that are sustainable, and they came up with a number of suggestions. A number of them that we've addressed today, right? That second one there, consider steps to access golden pennies. The third one is to increase facility rental rates. We've actually already addressed student parking, but let's talk about facility rental fees. If you'll look at the first four columns, those are neighboring districts and what they charge on their various facilities for rental. The gray column is what Bernie charges, and what is in blue is what we're recommending and the increase. What we're proposing is just basically an average of what the other districts around us are doing. It is a significant increase, local policy GKD gives the superintendent the authority to set and adjust rental rates. But these are folks that you know in the youth sports organizations and be involved in them yourself. These are folks that you know in the churches that rent from us. The district gets $200,000 to $300,000 in rental fees, and so I just wanted y'all to chew on this and provide feedback on what you thought about these changes to the rental rates.
This is per day,
No, ma'am.
per hour?
Miss Flores, per hour.
Per hour?
So you're saying we generate $200,000 to $300,000 a year from rentals right now?
Yes.
I know I've talked with, and I have friends that run sports programs and stuff, and the pay isn't really an issue. They've talked to me about accessibility is the issue, not necessarily what they're paying for it. The one, though, I haven't spoken with is I know there's churches that utilize facilities, and I don't know what the hurdles will be there. I know last year there was quite a bit of hurdles for those church groups. Do we have any idea of people that might not be able to access this anymore?
That may not be able to access it anymore? Oh, no, I'm not aware. I've got a few more comments on churches that I would like y'all to consider in changes to the terms, because I'm going to make y'all aware of the changes to the terms that we're proposing, and that could impact the churches as well. because this rates is one component of what we're wanting to do this summer.
Is it a majority nonprofits that are doing the rentals?
Yes, we have limitations on entities that are not nonprofits that would want to use our
So
facility.
we couldn't give like a discount to nonprofits because they're pretty much all nonprofits.
They're all nonprofits. But when you talk about the per hour rate, most of them are renting it for about, your churches are renting for 3 or 4 hours or 5 hours in the morning. Most of these are for practices or something like that, so they're renting.
I think about Stillwater, who's renting 8 hours a day for the entire month of June. And I think about our club sports that are renting, 3 and 4 hours a day. I mean, I appreciate their the BSAC's idea in this, and I do agree that we are probably lower than we should be. So just thinking out loud.
Well, I'm kind of with you on that because if we raise these, we're basically, it's a different form of a tax increase on our local community. Having said that, and I can understand why you came up with the proposed, because that puts us at an average. Maybe we do what's called a Texas two-step, and we do one step initially now, and we raise it. I'll just give an example. Jim Elementary School, which to Christy's point is, Stillwater is renting it for the month. To go from 27 to 75, the average is right around 75. Well, let's say we did 40, or let's say we did 45 or 50 or something like that. Then you could show these nonprofits, hey, folks, we're still the lowest by far, but our costs have gone up. And that may be a way, because if we go with the proposed, that could be theoretically doubling it from $250,000 to $500,000. But the question that I think it was Dallas asked, what are we at jeopardy of losing if somebody feels they're being priced out? And maybe the difference is, can we do it part of the way through, still be the lowest cost in the area, and generate $100,000?
Yeah, my concern is not looking at these facilities, but as ours, but as the communities. I mean, they're the ones who pass the bonds to give us the accessibility to even own these. And then pricing those people out of the facility that they paid for and they continue to pay for. I would just be concerned, especially with what we're wanting to propose. I think doing 2 of these and hitting people on both sides of that might not be the best timing. I don't want to price people out of using their own facilities. That's where I will first stand. But the second one is doing this in correlation with something that might be coming in the next couple months. I think might be a bad look.
That's a really good point, Dallas. And not to mention that a lot of these nonprofits service children that are not even necessarily in our schools. They may be homeschooled or they're going to private school. To your point, it's community facilities. Because we certainly hear about it when people say, well, I pay property taxes too. Well, so do I. And I don't have any kids in the schools, I'm happy to, I'm happy to pay my tax.
And so we're not losing money. We're already making money at the lower rates that we have now. Correct.
Yeah. Oh, correct. Yes.
So we're just looking to make more money off possibly our community is.
I wouldn't even phrase it that way.
Okay.
We're just adjusting fees to for what other districts are doing at this point in time. In my experience, because I spent a lot of professional time in the Metroplex and in the San Antonio metropolitan area, even these rates that you see for the 4 districts that we put up there are far less than what they would have to pay to a sports authority or to somebody that was actually running a business that would provide space. Yeah. And this is by far the cheapest that they're going to find. I get the heartburn over tripling the rates, and what we may need to do is just revisit and come back to finance committee on something that doesn't involve the word doubling or tripling the rate.
And I agree because it is our taxpayers, because if it is a sports event for children, now that's going to get put back onto those families in our district who are now going to have to pay extra money so that they have a place to work out. So it's impacting our families by that, which they're already paying the tax dollars. So I kind of echo what the board is saying, that that might be a little steep right now.
Well, you're right. You're right, Sarah, because I mean, they would just have to raise the fees to the kids to be part of the program. You know, and let's say, I'm just going to throw it out, elementary school gym, let's say instead of going from 27 to 75, you go to 35 or whatever the number is. You know, then it gives us a talking point to say, hey, look, here's what we do for our community. Because I remember a number of years back, you know, when we have more churches now using our facilities on Sundays than we used to have 5 years ago. And I remember the discussion was, well, they're part of our community. You know, we want to make it friendly to the community. Well, this is a great talking point that we're making our facilities friendly to the community. When the Bernie Performing Arts still existed, it's a shame they went out of business. You would see all the people attending the events at the Champion Auditorium, and they were all people in their 60s, 70s, and 80s. I felt like the young kid there, trust me. And I'm a senior citizen, all right? It was an old group, but they just loved seeing the facilities that they were helping pay for. And then our kids are providing entertainment before the performing arts show. It was just a good thing. It was a good community feel.
One thing we might consider if looking at custodial and audiovisual, I think about how much we pay coaches to fill in for bus driving, how much more they make in that type of scenario. So this might be an opportunity that we could help our custodio and audiovisual out a little more. So do they get requested? Do the rentees, do they have to request custodial and audiovisual, or does it automatically get included in their rental?
No, it's a required charge because we have to have somebody to be on site to open and close facilities and clean the facility.
Rick, did you have a question?
Oh, just a comment, and I think you've done the work on that. And just to frame things accurately, we wouldn't normally have the lights, the AC, the custodial staff in the building unless these were being rented. So when we frame it as if we're making a profit off of it, my guess is if you looked at the numbers, we're just not taking as great a loss. I went by Saturday to Bernie ISD Stadium. Several thousand folks using the facility, and both external custodial and internal custodial actively working. I don't know what the lease agreement is to lease the stadium, but I just want it to be framed accurately, because when I asked, do we normally keep the lights on? Are we normally providing AC and all those things, which is a great expense, as well as the custodial folks? I don't believe there's a profit margin at all. And I believe Wes has looked at these numbers. And my only exposure on that is on the safety and security side. When we look at that and say, if we're providing a facility, do we need to be providing the security side of it? Bernie Performing Arts is a great example where that came out of my budget to be able to cover that and maintain that safely. Because of the overlap of students from school being on campus, we still had a responsibility to maintain our security posture on that. So if that, it helped me understand that. I didn't know maybe if that highlighted it a little bit better.
There's things in here that I know we're utilizing that I'm not seeing. Like for example, Fair Oaks Elementary, I know I-9 takes over like the entire, so what is that rental rate? I mean, I'm looking out there trying to figure out what that would even, where the rental rate is on that. But I'm with you on that. Is I mean, we can't be a huge deficit. You know, this isn't a charity necessarily. You know, so, but I would like to be as close to even on that probably as possible.
What was the?
As far as like elementary, because it's not a gym, it's not the building, the fields at elementary schools and stuff for events.
We do not charge for fields. Principals have the latitude to grant access to their fields, and in certain circumstances like South, you can't keep people out of those fields, right? That we don't have the security to keep folks from coming onto those.
Okay, so yeah, like South, the lacrosse team that practices there, they're, because I'm that's another rubbing point for me, but that's not a charged event.
Now, we're going to have all kinds of exceptions, and I would say in the circumstance that Ms. Schmidt mentioned earlier, we've got the latitude to make any kind of special agreement that we would want to. This is outlined specifically board policy.
That's something I think it need to be addressed, because it's definitely, it takes money to keep those fields and keep the facility in good shape. So that's something before I really look at somebody getting priced out of something, I'd want to make sure we're recouping that cost.
So I would agree. I was going to say what Rick said before he did that. Same thing. I don't think this is a profit center at all. I think this is offsetting the costs that we're incurring to provide those facilities. I think the graph you have is a phenomenal graph, and my philosophy would be I don't want to triple people's rents on an hourly basis, but I think it would be very fair to say, this over the next 3 years, here's what our rental rate is going to increase to, and here's why. Look at the comparative districts around us and what they're doing. Anybody that's rational is going to understand that. I wouldn't do it in one step, but maybe we do it in 2 or 3. But with this background data.
I think there's also a sense of fairness within the community because, everybody pays property taxes, but then if we have these incredibly subsidized rates for certain people that use the facilities, well, somebody that's not, maybe the retired folks that don't have kids in sports and that sort of thing, they're not using the facilities, they're not getting the benefit of that subsidized rate. And so it's kind of in a sense, picking winners and losers by not having a market rate, I'm not saying we should bump it up that much either. It's just, having some people benefit while others don't get the benefit of that, but they are also still paying taxes. That's just something to, I think, take into account.
Really good feedback. I like what I'm hearing because we can come back with something tiered. I think that's a really good idea. But we really need to do the next thing, because the costs to the people that are renting are not. So we've got a number of things that we're going to change on our terms in consideration of what happened at Bernie High School last year. I would recommend that we require renters to get a significantly higher coverage because what happened at Bernie High, what they have for coverage did not cover the cost of what was damaged. Our insurance had to come in. We're still going through I'm going to get this wrong, the subrogation process. And I would recommend the increase to insurance coverage. That's by far the most important thing on here. And that's going to, whatever cost they have to get insurance, that is going to triple that cost. We're going to triple.
If we have damages that exceeds $1 million and we're on the hook for that, our insurance covers it, but then our premiums go up. So to your point, I think that's well thought out.
So like you're saying, there's people that are utilizing our facilities without any type of agreement. Are they required to abide by this same thing? Because I think that's something we have to have a standard. If you're on campus and someone gets hurt per se, we're going to, that's a potential claim for us.
Well, the district is protected by Texas tort law against injury on property. So we won't have any insurance considerations there. But the only difference between those folks and the folks renting facilities is it's an open field. They're not renting the facility. So does that make sense?
Yes, but you still have damages all types of stuff can happen.
Absolutely.
So I feel that if you're utilizing it, especially if you're making a profit off of utilizing our facility, there has to be an agreement. I like the good old boy, but you can't, if you're going to have a rule for one, you have to have it for all.
Yeah, that gets into the fun part of facility rentals is trying to police folks making money off your facility. I've been at districts where that was specifically written into board policy, and trying to police somebody utilizing a tennis court and giving less is difficult to do, but part of the deal. Can do. There are other changes that we would put forward here. We don't have any defined age limit for rentals right now. We're just going to put that into our form. Churches. As Kendall County grows, you're going to have more and more churches, right? And so what we're proposing right now is that we do a maximum rental term of 12 months for churches to be examined on an annual basis because they're a part of our community. We want to be sure that churches are, schools are a place where a fledgling church can come and not have the rental costs as they try to get their capital budget in place to build. But we don't want the church to become, our school to become that church home, right? So, so that's, I've been in organizations or districts where they have a defined limit. You can't be in the school for longer than a certain term. I'm not bringing that forward at this point in time, but at least examining them on a regular basis, I think, is important. In consideration of our campuses, we're not going to let anybody reserve a rental more than 6 months in advance, so that if something changes and we have a school event that needs to happen and it's tied up because somebody's already rented the cafeteria or we're giving our principals a reasonable amount of time to be sure that their schedules are in place. Schools need to come first. We're certainly not going to make our facilities available in advance of testing dates. In acknowledgement of what Chief Goodrich was saying a little bit earlier, we want to require for any groups larger than 100 that they have a licensed law enforcement official, and recognize that there may be fees associated with that if they need to pay the city or the county or whatever law enforcement agency is in place, the responsibility for that lies with the group rent, and that won't be flowing through the.
I make sure they have the insurance that they are required to have. From there, they can request their designated campus, and that goes directly to the campus secretary, who reviews. She'll review it with the principal, and then as soon as they approve it, they create an invoice. I can usually and then from there, it's an automatic notification. So if they've checked mark AC, our HVAC team gets notified. If they've checked mark, if we incorporate security, we'll be able to, for 100 people or more, it'll notify whoever we decide. Same with no, it'll be after. Mm-hmm. So we don't rent after our last day of school. Yes, there's no rentals during holidays, state fest, any type of teacher work day.
And we don't normally rent state. I guess the what I'll say is there's the capability to rent, and right, and those are all going to be one-offs that we're going to have to negotiate the agreement, put them in place. We won't. What we're presenting to you is the common rental that we're going to have, and the ones that are going to mostly be the community. Like, we can always get approached by I don't know who it was at the time. Was it the Brahmas or the Commanders that wanted to rent a stadium, practice for a little bit? I was at another district where they had these big swimming facilities. So we had the Olympic team wanted to use it for a while, and they wanted to have world champions. All those were individually negotiated projects where every single one of these facility logistic and security considerations need to be taken into effect, coordinated with all the other entities. We'll handle those. All right. Is there any other questions about what we intend to put onto the for comment? Yes, that is a direct response to past where people were taking advantage that shouldn't. So, felt that.
With that being said, then they're using our equipment, that they're using our volleyball nets, they're using our,
They can't store it.
they can't store it, but still they puts wear and tear on our equipment.
Well, that's you'll see that very last item there. That's at the discretion and approval of the campus and the athletic director. If the volleyball coach doesn't want a volleyball team to be using their volleyball net because they've experienced misuse of that equipment in the past, volleyball team wants to use our courts, they could bring their own.
Good deal.
Okay. The next steps, next week, we're going to adopt a budget, and we're going to appoint an efficiency auditor. We're going to recommend y'all use, we conduct the financial statement audits for the district. That efficiency audit be conducted at the same time as the financial statement audit. That's ready by the deadlines for Avator, the beginning of October. And then, did you want to talk about what happened?
So you have a hold on your calendar. We went back and forth for dates in July. So if we need to have a meeting, that's a date that is held on your calendars.
All right, and then in August, we'll have a board meeting and adopt a tax rate and declare Vader and deal with the fallout of what we've learned between now and then, as there's going to be a lot. I know just informationally, Mo Casey released a brand new template today. I know the Center for School Finance is coming out with their own as well, and they're diving into this stuff and talking with districts, talking with folks like me to figure out the impact of a lot of legislation. So as I become aware, I'll make y'all aware, and we'll move forward.
I do want to say thank you to the team who's been hard at work on pulling everything together. As soon as House Bill 2 passed, we knew the marching orders, and we're still unraveling things. And I just want to say thank you to our board for committing about 4 hours this morning to dig into this with us.
Well, I just want to share that in 11 years on the board, and Carlin, you've been around a long time too. I think this is the most detailed, comprehensive assessment of our budget that I've seen, and I really appreciate it. It talks about what we can do and what we would like to do, and nothing in the comprehensive strategic budget plan, none of that is some radical, wild expenditure of money. I mean, getting our paraprofessionals up to $16 an hour is hardly revolutionary. It just makes us that much more competitive and to be able to attract and retain people, which is very important to our teachers. The help they give to our teachers is very important. So, I think you've covered all the bases, and I appreciate it, and I think it was well done.
One thing I thought was interesting, and we don't have the numbers yet of what every other district around us is going to pass in terms of a budget, but just looking at this without seeing those numbers, I don't think even if we have the 3 extra cents and the additional state funding that all of our wildest dreams are going to come true. In fact, I think we're still going to be struggling to be competitive even with those funds. So I just think that's something to think about, you know.
Wes, going back to kind of the beginning of the meeting when we talked about HB2, the impact of that, the hold harmless. So there's not grievance, it's we have to claim.
An appeal process.
Appeal process or claim. Do we have any idea what the timing on that looks like?
Don't know what the timing is, don't know what the process looks like, just know that it'll be Mike Morath making recommendations to Governor Abbott for consideration. That's all that's really spelled out in the legislation at this point in time.
Okay. So once certified values come in and Wes is able to plug in the funding formulas to how we would find, I mean, right now, 3.8 million versus roughly 6 million, that's, I'd say that's 99% accurate, 95% accurate, but once it's become more finalized, you can quantify what the real impact to us is. And as he mentioned, you've got Leander, Round Rock is another district that's getting nailed, Bandera, us, somewhere between 10 and 20 statewide. And, you know, I think if you talk to the average legislator, they would say, well, gosh, it was never the intention to hurt a district financially based on property tax compression. That was never the intent. So hopefully that'll be backed up by Buckley and Creighton, which will just help the whole concept of an appeal. But I would imagine, my gut tells me 3 to 6 months. That's just a gut. I may be way off on that.
Anybody else for the good of the cause? All right, I would entertain a motion to adjourn. All in favor? All right.